this webinar. We've had a few technical difficulties, but welcome everyone to today's webinar, which is on livable neighbourhoods. My name is Dina Romero and I'm the leader of Bath North East Somerset Council. I am joined today by Councillor Joanna Wright, who is Cabinet Member for Transport, and also Councillor Sarah Warren, who is Cabinet Member for the Climate Emergency. Also on the panel today is Chris Major, who is the Assistant Director for Highways and Transport. We've had a large number of questions submitted prior to this webinar, and we will of course try to address these through this afternoon's session. And hopefully we'll have time to pick up some other questions as well from those that are watching right now. But obviously if we don't get time to address all of those, we will do our best to address those in due course after this webinar. So just so everyone else knows, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. And we believe that will be available from tomorrow. Okay, so we have recently published ambitious proposals. These were in our manifesto to deliver livable neighbourhoods. And obviously there's a lot of questions about exactly what is a livable neighbourhood. So we wanted to create better places across Bath and North East Somerset to make more accessible places, improve air quality, tackle the climate and nature emergencies. Obviously you will, I'm sure, be aware that we declared a nature emergency on Thursday, and also to improve people's health. The Council has developed 3 complementary strategies for low traffic neighbourhoods, residence parking schemes and electric vehicle charging. And the discussion today is to explain why we are introducing livable neighbourhoods and explain the proposals contained within this package of transport related measures. So I'd like to now hand over to Councillor Warren to just get a bit of insight in how this work will support the Council's climate and nature emergency commitments, and also help us reach the carbon neutrality target that we set ourselves for 2030.
Yeah, thank you, Dina. So last year the Council declared a climate emergency, and as you said, we're aiming for zero carbon by 2030. And so then the first thing we did after making that declaration was to commission some research to look at what are the biggest causes of the carbon emissions by the district. And that, we reported on that to the October council meeting last year. So the full report, if anyone's interested, is available on the council website. And essentially, the headlines are that energy use arising from buildings is the largest source of carbon emissions at 66% of the total. But after that comes transport at 29%. And the research went beyond that and looked at what we would have to do in order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. And the answer in terms of transport then is that we would need a 25% cut in car and van mileage per person per year by 2030, alongside a 76% switch to electric vehicles and full electrification of rail. So delivering livable neighbourhoods is a key plank of our delivering the shift to active modes of transport and public transport that we need to do in order to hit that 2030 target. And as you said, it's also really important in terms of tackling our poor air quality here in the city, along with other health problems arising from car use, such as the epidemic nationally that we have of obesity and road traffic accidents. And congestion doesn't only cause those problems, there's also a financial cost to businesses. So if we can reduce congestion, you know, it's a win always on.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, now this is a question now for Joanna, for Councillor Joanna Wright. Can you explain what the Livable Neighbourhoods vision and principles are? What do we actually mean by it? Okay,
can I have some slides, please? So what we mean by a livable area is that I guess our vision over the last few years, really, to be elected and to get into power and then to put our manifesto in place, is that our vision is to create better places across Bath and North East Somerset that promotes sustainable and active travel and public transport use, and it improves community health and it reduces the need for short car journeys. I don't think a lot of people are aware of just the sheer scale of short car journeys, particularly in Bath. 42% of all journeys of less than 3 kilometres are journeys in Bath are taken by people in private vehicles. So if we are to, as Sarah has pointed out, reduce our carbon emissions, we're going to have to really look at this group of people and how we could encourage them to make other choices. And what we hear from a lot of people is that they don't want to make those other choices because they feel that there's too much through traffic, there's a lot of rat running, there's speeding, etc., etc. So this was a photograph that was taken on Great Pulteney Street during lockdown, and it clearly shows a family, a father with a tag along with a baby in the back, a very small child, I think she was about 4, and a mother cycling along Great Pulteney Street. And as you can see, they felt very secure and happy in this space, taking their children out for a cycle ride. And I guess what we would like to do within Livable Neighbourhoods is also to encourage people to cycle, and more importantly to walk places, so that they feel that their neighbourhoods belong to them, that they aren't spaces in which cars are cutting through them, and that they can have places to walk to. Could I have the next slide, please? So one of the areas in the country that has led on livable neighbourhoods is an area of North London called Waltham Forest. And the deputy leader of that council is a man called Councillor Clyde Lokes. And he came and gave a very entertaining talk in February of this year in the Guildhall. I would highly recommend, if you ever hear him speaking, to go and see him, just because he's a particularly passionate and interesting speaker. So he gave a very good talk about what they did in Waltham Forest and why they did that. And he based it upon 3 clear reasons. The environment, as Sarah has pointed out, but also in terms of public health, and also in terms of social justice. And he explained that quite clearly. Could I have the next slide, please? One of the things that they did was improve this particular high street called Orford Road in Walthamstow. And as you can see, it now has restrictions from 10 till 6. I think it's Monday to Sunday, actually, and you can't drive through that. They had a lot of backlash from their community when they put in these measures, but he was very, very persistent in how they went about it, and he really believed in the long-term consequences for many. And as I said, they were based on the environment, which we need to clearly address. We have to reduce our carbon emissions if we are to reach carbon neutrality, but also in terms of social justice. So what do we mean by social justice? I don't think people realise just how many people don't have access to a private vehicle. It's actually 1 in 5 people. And private vehicles across everywhere we go make noise, they cause congestion, they stop children playing in the street. And if we are to tackle that, then we need to make sure that local places provide areas for people to reclaim their neighbourhood, essentially. And then the other 2 issue is public health. Could I have the next slide, please? And one of the ways that low traffic neighbourhoods are enabled is to create what's called modal filters. And this is a modal filter in Waltham Forest. And as you can see, what they have essentially done is blocked off an end of a road that normally attached itself to the main route. And now, quite clearly, cyclists and walking people can move through that neighbourhood, and cars now can't pass at speed and be the predominant user in that space. So the space becomes fairer and equitable for all. Could I have the next slide, please? So lots of people are wondering, how do you go about creating a low traffic neighbourhood? And there are lots of questions about this. And it does depend upon the geography of the space, how streets are laid out, and everywhere is different. And I really recognise that what they've done in Waltham Forest might not be exactly what we might do here in Bath North East Somerset. This is in fact a map of Harrow in North London, where they too are introducing a low traffic neighbourhood. And as you can see, a main road is looked at, and how streets across it are attached to it are defined, so that you can block off some but not all, so that what you want to do is basically, there's a word I find very hard to use, circuitously move around. no one is stopped from entering that neighbourhood. But if you do enter that neighbourhood by car, you have to really consider your journey. So it means that if you live at a street, in one street, and you want to get to another street, you'll soon learn that the quickest way to make that journey is by walking or cycling. However, we really recognise that there are still going to be people who need to use a car or want to have deliveries. So we are not stopping people driving their cars at any point. We're just making their journeys a bit more wiggly rather than circuitously. It's an easier word to use. So if we can make their journey a little bit more wiggly, then they will consider their journey. However, as I said, if you are a blue badge holder or you have mobility issues, you can still get in your car and you can still make that journey and you can still get to the location that you need to get to. So this is not about saying you can't use your car, cars are banned. This is clearly a scheme that says consider your journey, get in your car if you have to, but if you don't have to, please make that journey by walking or by cycling. And by walking or cycling, we will now provide a journey to you that is more enjoyable and sustainable. Next picture, please. And finally, this is a map of Waltham Forest council area. And as you can see on the left-hand side is a map of air pollution. The blue is air pollution in Waltham Forest. And then the map on the right shows what has happened to that air pollution by introducing low traffic neighbourhoods. The effect on public health is one of the most significant things about low traffic neighbourhoods and livable neighbourhoods, is that clearly listening to Waltham Forest and their journey on this is that they realised that they could put in pedestrian crossings, they could put in barriers and traffic calming schemes, but none of them actually had any impact. The real impact came when they put in modal filters and they deterred people from making those extra journeys. And that has had a significant effect upon public health for so many people in a way that very other few transport options could deliver, or even public health options could deliver. So what they spent and what they delivered has impacted upon their whole society for so many people across the whole district. And I guess that's one of the reasons that we need to look at this as a way forward. The reasons why we think low traffic neighbourhoods and livable neighbourhoods are a way forward is that it provides for the environment, it provides for social justice, and it provides for health. And they are key areas that we need to provide for our whole community. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. I'd just like to ask Chris if he'd like to pick up on some more of the detail, particularly those practical aspects of this. You know, just talk us through the process and timeline.
Thank you, Lida. That's great. Yes, we're looking to commence a consultation on the program, the strategies in August, because we're really keen to get feedback on the developing strategies from members of the public, how they can be considered and improved as we go into making them adopted in the winter, towards the winter. We're really keen that people feed into that process so that they can understand where we've got it right and any issues we've overlooked, anything we've missed, so that we can get full feedback on them and really then make sure that we can engage with all the communities across Bath and North East Somerset to understand what their needs are, because this really is about understanding how we can get buy-in from community activists and advocates for these solutions, to understand their real issues and to then find schemes that work for them.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to have a look at some of those questions that have come in. So some have already been answered. Some I think might need a little bit more detail on. So the first question I'm going to ask is to you, Jo, which is around those with mobility restrictions, you know, those of our residents who have a disability and rely on blue badges. I think maybe you could just give a little bit more information about how we will be catering for people who need to use their car.
we will certainly be catering for them. Nobody's blue badge will be taken from them. Nobody's disabled space will be taken from them. What we're trying to do is create a better space for them so that they can still continue to make their journey, and that their journey is probably easier to make because there is less congestion on the roads. So we really value those people in our community and really recognise that they need to have cars to move around. But we also recognise that there are people who have mobility issues that might be in a mobility scooter, or who are on use walking sticks and would like to get around and walk. And we clearly need everybody to be as active as possible. And what low traffic neighbourhoods and livable streets give you is spaces in which people feel more comfortable to make those short walkable journeys, that there aren't cars rushing by, there isn't large amounts of noise taking place, where they are fearful, that they can get across the road quietly and safely. So we really recognise that they are an important part of the part of our community, and we want them to be in our community, and we want them to have access to as many areas as possible. And this hopefully will enable that to take place.
And a sort of similar question from Susan Charles, who represents Access Baines. I think she's the chair of that group, and she tells a pretty awful story of a blind colleague who had her white walking stick knocked out of her hand by a passing cyclist, and she was given abusive language. So the question here is about, around cyclists, e-scooters and skateboarders, and whether they ought to be allowed to ride through pedestrian areas in the city centre.
It's quite clear against on legality, as I'm sort of looking here at Chris Major because he can make sure I get it right, is that those spaces are, if you are on a public highway, then you can use a certain number of those contraptions, shall we say. But you can't just use them on pavements in an aggressive manner, and at no way would we ever support that behaviour. What we are looking for is that all elements of our society, be they in a car, be they on an e-scooter or a bicycle or walking, are supported in the best way possible, and that we all create spaces that support each other and make our culture as positive as possible. It's certainly of interest to me that in the Netherlands and in Denmark particularly, they have very successful walking and cycling rates, and they don't seem to have the amount of aggression that we have. We seem to have created a culture where we are very all cross with each other, and that everybody else is not behaving as they should. And we all need to challenge ourselves to think that everybody on the public highway has a right to be there, and that we need to be a bit more generous with our speed and our space.
Thank you. And Chris, this will give you the opportunity to fill in anything that Joanna's missed. I doubt there is anything she's missed there. But, a question has been raised around the help that lower income residents might get to help take up cycling, upgrade vehicles, etc., or to buy any mobility aids that are necessary for them to walk. I don't know if you can perhaps share any information you might have on or any help that might be available.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the point Joe made before was critical, really. It's about consideration, isn't it? It's about recognising that spaces are shared and that some people may need more consideration within those spaces. But we are looking to really try to push and promote active travel for all. This isn't about any particular form of active travel. This will be all forms of active travel. Pedestrians are the majority of all active travel journeys that happen, and we all walk regularly. But we're looking to help support that. We already have in place a number of schemes to help promote cycling through schools and similar, and we'll be pushing and continuing with those types of schemes as we go forward. Within Waltham Forest, for example, they have done an awful lot to provide bikes for low-income households and promote those type of schemes. So we're really keen to hear back from people and understand what they would like to help them. But this is really about the strategies, about bringing the places together. It's about reallocating road space to those who need it, rather than the pedestrians, for example, being pushed to the edge of the road when cars dominate space, and really to try and make those spaces much more livable, as the name implies, people to be connected, so that they spend more time with neighbours, with friends, people mixing in the street and similar. This is about understanding how people move around spaces and really focusing on those who use spaces. We know that females use public space much more than males, so understanding how they use the space and what sort of schemes we can bring together, and the strategies hopefully allow people to start understanding how their communities can function differently.
I was going to say that really getting the strategy in place is the start, because having the strategy in place then opens the door to possible sources of funding that we may have access to. So if we find that we need to provide support for those on lower incomes with getting hold of bikes or other forms of transport, the strategy is the start.
So yeah, I was just going to follow that up to what Sarah said. This is the strategy which we're beginning. We really recognise that we're literally on a journey. This is the first start of it. You know, we've been asked questions for the last year about why haven't you put in cycle spaces over here, or why aren't you providing this cycle lane over there? We really recognise that those things need to come, but we have to start somewhere, and our starting somewhere comes from a strategy and a policy. And I don't think people realise quite how local government works, that, you know, you have to get elected, you have to come together as a group, you have to take through a policy and a strategy that has to then go to the public, that they have to consult and they have to agree with, and then it goes back to the council to go through a cabinet to be signed off. And that is the process that we're legally going through, so that we can then deliver what we said we were going to do in the right framework. And we really recognise that there are many things that we should be doing, and we should be bidding funding for and looking to do that. But until we have that policy and that strategy legally in place, it's very challenging for us to bid for money or to take that thing forward.
And I assume that sometimes some announcements, perhaps by government, perhaps may confuse issues. Certainly they confuse us, I think, in the council, but obviously undoubtedly they would do so for residents too. I suspect there's quite a lot of confusion over low traffic neighbourhoods versus, say, the measures that we were asked to put in for social distancing. I don't know if any of that, if there's any other examples.
So at the moment we have been putting in social distancing measures, as people have seen, in the city centre and in areas around Bath, and we've shut down Keynsham High Street, for instance. But that has come for no other reason than central government said to us that we need you to protect public health because of COVID-19. And if we are to encourage people back into the public space, you need to make sure that social distancing can be carried out. And that is why we have undertaken those measures.
And so, you know, some people might want to see those social distancing measures continued, and obviously others may not. How are we sort of judging how well they've worked in terms of any impact they may have had on road use?
I'm looking at Chris here.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris.
So we've already asked people to start feeding back their comments on all the schemes we've implemented. It is a very difficult balance. We're talking about public health here as the critical issue that we're trying to deal with, and making sure that those who may be shielding, may need extra support, are able to continue about their daily life and have the space to do it. But we've asked for feedback to make sure that we can understand how the schemes have worked for the communities, and then we'll take their thoughts and develop those into future schemes or permanent changes where appropriate. We haven't made any prejudged outcomes on that yet. We're interested to see what people say. But I think we're all aware that there could be links to second spikes of COVID and similar, and we have to take that into account. You know, as a local authority, we have a responsibility to think of those who may have particular issues, particular health challenges, and whilst sometimes they can be slightly inconvenient for some road users, it could make a real difference for some people to be able to go about their normal daily business. So we're trying to look at it holistically across the piece and trying to come up with the best answers.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm just quickly having a quick look at all the as I said, there were an awful lot of questions that came in, and I'm just having a quick look to see if there's others. So I guess, you know, this is an interesting question, which is about enforcement. So how will we make sure that the measures we put in are actually adhered to? I suspect there might be another question for Chris.
Yeah, I think so. I always see enforcement as the last step of any process. So what we'd want to do is engage with communities at the start. I know we keep repeating, but it's really critical people understanding. It's about understanding the space and how people move around and how people want to move around. Any scheme would allow any member of the public to continue driving. We've already talked about how people may have to slightly divert their normal route to get the benefits of a low traffic neighbourhood, but it doesn't stop you using your car. Any enforcement would only be around residents parking, which we see widely in Bath North East Somerset already, and that sort of thing. But it's about making sure that the vehicles are using the road in the right way, the right vehicles are going to the right places, that those who are coming into the city for shopping, leisure, use the car parks where appropriate, ideally use park and rides or public transport if they can. And then enforcement's the very last tool that we ever revert to, and we would try to avoid it if possible.
Thank you, Chris. So a common point of view is that implementing schemes like low traffic neighbourhoods, and indeed any of the other sort of road related schemes that we have been considering or have put in, will increase the amount of traffic on the roads, particularly on the arterial routes. Firstly, do you think that is a true assessment of what will happen? And secondly, does that actually increase the health divide between richer and poorer parts of the city?
So the evidence that's come forward from other cities and areas that have looked at these types of schemes is that doesn't happen. Now, again, I know that it's going to be really hard to understand when we start talking about situations such as traffic evaporation. But basically what happens and what the evidence suggests happens is that as you close off neighbourhoods, that people find alternative ways to move. So those who would have drove from that area start to walk and cycle and reduce the amount of traffic moving around, and that frees up capacity on other roads, the main arterial routes. There will be some displacement on to more suitable arterial routes, and then that does have an impact. And we're very much aware that some of the arterial routes also have residential properties, etc. But this is just one of a number of different approaches we're taking. We also have the clean air zone coming forward, which will reduce the overall emissions from vehicles. And it has to be seen like that. You know, we have no option to do nothing. Traffic numbers are increasing year on year, numbers of vehicles on the road, etc. We can't do nothing to achieve the climate declaration. And this starts to give space back to those neighbourhoods. This starts to give space back to people to move more actively and hopefully improve their overall health.
Sarah.
I was going to say, I think that the communications as we run up to going live with a particular scheme will be really important. If we can explain to people what's going to happen and manage their expectations, they will know to change their behaviour. So, I mean, just as a, for instance, supposing I lived in Larkhall and I wanted to pop into Bath by car for an errand, and low traffic neighbourhoods had been introduced in my area, it might make me think twice. I might, in fact, instead of getting into my car, I might put on my wellies and put up my umbrella and stride off in the rain. Or I might think, oh, I'll save it until I've got another errand and I'll do them together on another day when it's not raining. So it will reduce the overall number of journeys. And then in a different scenario, supposing, as I used to do, I used to commute from Bath Eastern to the RUH, and I used to rat run through some of the neighbourhoods on the way. Well, if we have a big publicity campaign running up to go live, I will know that on the day of go live of low traffic neighbourhoods, that in fact my journey will take much longer. So I'm going to have to find another way. So I'll have time to get my bike out and take it for a service and you know, give it a good old oil and make sure it still goes, ready, so that on that day, and I'll try out the route beforehand, I'll have plenty of time to prepare and get ready so that I find a new way of travelling to the RUH.
Thank you, Sarah, and reminding us all that we need to get our bikes in good order as well. So one question that I have then is around pilot schemes. I mean, with the Clean Air Zone, there's a whole piece of work that is going to be implemented at once. When we're looking at low traffic neighbourhoods, would we be looking at a sort of a whole city, or are we looking at discrete areas to actually do sort of pilots in?
We're very aware from our own ward councillors where there is severe through traffic taking place in Bath. Now, so what we would want to do is initially listen to ward councillors who we are hoping will go out and listen to their residents and feed back through that process where their issues are and what they look like. And then from getting that information, we will have an understanding of where spaces are that we should concentrate some time and resources on to coming up with some kind of schemes. So we will not be dropping in low traffic neighbourhoods across the whole city in one fell swoop. We will certainly be wanting to work with key areas and see how that works and what that looks like and what that possible reduction in traffic looks like, or what that displacement in traffic could be, and how it has improved the lives for those who live there in terms of walking and cycling. We're also keenly aware that the geography of Bath has implications to lots of people. There are lots of hills in Bath, and that has stopped an awful lot of people making those short journeys. We know that in the short term that we're going to have e-scooters being trialled into this city. We're looking at putting in some e-bikes into this city as well. So if we can build on those various small footsteps and gradually get there, that is hopefully our way of bringing this change about. That it's not going to be one fell swoop, but that we will work with ward councillors and with their residents and hear their stories and take this initiative forward.
And thank you, Joanna, for bringing up e-scooters. It would be useful, I think, just to share why it is that we're implementing schemes around e-scooters at this time.
Bath North East Somerset is something is part of the West of England Combined Authority WECA, and under WECA we come under something called the Future Mobility Zone. Any future mobility zone across the country has been given funding by DFT to bring in e-scooters and to have a trial over a year to see what they are and how they could be used in those areas. We are one of those trial areas, and from mid-September we will be having the ability to license out e-scooters across Bath. I know that there are lots of questions about what that is and what that looks like, and I won't be going into that detail at the moment, but there will be further information on that. But it is a great opportunity because, as I said, we have to reduce our carbon. How do we do that? And I really recognise that journeys sometimes take a little bit longer if you're walking. So I certainly know in my own lifestyle at the moment, before COVID-19, you know, I have a family to run and my husband's away most of the week. I have 2 children at school. Getting to and from my workplace to my home to make sure I cook the dinner for them is time consuming. You know, it would be quicker for me to get in a car. If I can do that in another way that doesn't use carbon, would that not be better? And if we can provide that infrastructure for people that allows them to feel that they can do that in a safe manner, be that on an e-scooter, on a bicycle, then maybe we need to try those options. At the moment, we haven't tried those options, and we are in a catastrophic situation in terms of our carbon output. We have to manage it. How do we manage it? This is an idea. We hope this idea works. It's certainly a learning curve. We need to work with the community to come with us on that journey and try and make that change. And we really need the backing of the community to make this change. We're not going to do this on our own anymore. The council is just a part of the whole community. We need the community to think about how they make those journeys, why they make those journeys, and could they make those journeys in a different way? And if they could make them in a different way, how can they support this policy and strategy so that we can take this initiative further?
Thank you, Joanna. So there's been a few questions and comments, both in the chat and on the live questions, and also in the questions that were submitted earlier. Some of them are around different groups within the community. So perhaps those maybe older people who might not be so able to use a bike or to walk. So, you know, what role does public transport have to play in this?
I think we're very much aware that not everybody is able-bodied and able to cycle and walk, etc. And that's really the key to the low traffic neighbourhoods. Is it doesn't prevent anybody from using a car. They may have to go a slightly different route, but there's certainly no reason they can't use a car. But I think there's also a recognition that there's lots of people who would be more active and more mobile if they had the opportunity, if they felt safer. And this really sort of brings together those two elements of being able to continue to use your car if you need to, but also gives you real options to move differently, to move in a way that's more active, to look across those health benefits that can come with being more active within the community, and also the social connection that you get with seeing other people out and about within your area, people moving out and engaging, which has wide-ranging benefits as well for both physical and mental health. So these schemes aren't designed to prevent anybody doing moving about how they wish. It's about giving other options for people to be able to move in a more sustainable way.
And I guess that would also apply to school children. I know that's a common comment, isn't it, that children and parents of school children say that they would love their children to walk or to cycle to school, but it's too dangerous because of all the traffic on the road, so therefore they drive their children to school. So I guess schemes like this will start to redress that and make it safer for children to walk to school or to cycle or to, I suppose they could go on a scooter, not an e-scooter, because I know there's an age limit, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. You need a driving license for an e-scooter, but you're absolutely right. It's about making people feel more confident within the space, within road space, trying to reduce the domination of cars so that people feel like they can cycle to school and walk to school. You know, as a father of two children myself, my children walk to school every day, and I know there's lots more kids who would like to do that. So yeah, bringing the Liveable Neighbourhoods schemes in opens up those opportunities and then reduces the overall numbers of vehicles moving about on the network.
And one point actually that has come up in, I think this was in the chat, is this, a lot of what we've been talking about seems to be quite Bath centric. Is this a range of schemes that could be rolled out into other parts of our area?
So one of the things that we're on a learning curve, and we recognise that so far most low traffic neighbourhoods and livable neighbourhoods have been delivered in urban settings. Bath North East Somerset has the joy of being an urban setting with a rural hinterland, which is very valuable. And how we pull that change together, I think, is one of the most exciting things about the area that we live in. How we connect the rural to the urban has not been managed in terms of carbon reduction or thought through, I think, in anywhere across the country. So I don't have a direct answer for you. I don't have a magic wand, but what I do know is that we're really, really thinking about this, and we get together on a regular basis to work out what opportunities there can be and how we can take things forward. So what we're hoping is that we can deliver this within the particular urban area, and then see how that learning curve can be taken into the more rural areas and what we could do in those other areas. So we clearly want to hear from the rural community. We recognise that their issues are as important as the urban ones, and how we do that is not known because there's no one else has done this. So I don't have an answer for you, and I really want to put my hand up to that as a politician to say, I don't know. And I don't think people do that often enough. But what we do want to know is find out. And this is about learning how to do that.
Sarah.
I was going to say, in addition to rural areas, of course, Bath North East Somerset has some small towns of Keynsham and Midsummer Norton and Radstock and Peasdown and so on. And there may be locations in those towns where you think low traffic neighbourhoods would be applicable. And it's probably worth discussing, contacting your ward councillors and discussing them with them if you can see places where rat runs could be cut off and cars could be redirected onto more major roads.
So another question that's come up, or another theme that's come up, is around electric vehicles. And obviously we've been talking about cars as a kind of homogenous set. So, you know, if everybody switched to electric vehicles, or maybe, you know, future, maybe hydrogen, would we want to be implementing low traffic neighbourhoods?
Yes.
Yeah.
See, there's two of us who agree.
That wasn't even planned.
We really do, because what low traffic neighbourhoods goes back to that social justice issue. Even if every car in the world tomorrow was low carbon, what it would still do is cause congestion. What it would still do is be a speed issue. What it would still do is stop children crossing the road or playing in the street. So what we're trying to do is create a space that is about social justice as much as it is reducing the carbon. And that really is an important element of this. I went to Waltham Forest, and it was truly amazing. And this was before COVID-19, when none of us had heard the birds singing in Bath before. So, you know, you went to this North London borough, and you could hear the birds singing in a way that I've never ever heard birds singing in London. So you just think, well, what does that do for the people, and how does that make people feel? And I certainly can't, there isn't a person that has not said during COVID-19, when everybody did literally stop driving around, how wonderful it was to go for walks and how it felt different. So what we're trying to do is create that space where people feel that they can make those walking journeys, where they feel safe, where they can have conversations with their neighbours in the street, where their children can run across into the park or wherever they live, and they feel that those journeys are safe and they're not going to be mowed down by a vehicle coming at them at speed. Those kind of spaces are really important to our social well-being. And as we said at the beginning of this, you know, 1 in 5 people do not have access to a vehicle. So how do we make that space equitable for all? And what livable neighbourhoods do is give people that space.
So I've got just a few more sort of areas I want to try and address. So one is about measuring the success. So how will we measure the success of low traffic neighbourhoods? Will we use the same kind of criteria and technology that we've been using to measure our air quality, for example, or will we use some other criteria?
I think there's a number of different ways to measure success for low traffic neighbourhoods. We can obviously look at basic measurements such as numbers of vehicles using a particular road. We measure air quality at over 200 sites across the city already, and we know where we have exceedances of NOx, for example. So those sort of things are really easy to measure and to do. But there's also those intangible measurements, isn't it? It's about how people are using spaces that we bring together, about how many people are walking, cycling, choosing to be more active within those spaces, and really how that connection is going down. So that will be through the policies developing an idea of a community charter with advocates to try and get to understand how people are using the spaces going forward, and measuring those intangibles in a different way, and really trying to get people to feed back how successful it's been.
So, and going back to Waltham Forest, one of the things they did, they measured how many extra minutes a week somebody was cycling or walking, what life expectancy happened. And life expectancy has changed in Waltham Forest, and for significant numbers of people. That's a major outcome. And as we said, you know, air pollution has seriously reduced for a lot of people, and that has affected public health. So that would affect how much money is then spent on the NHS in terms of coronary diseases or respiratory diseases. We know that lots of children suffer from asthma now in a way that they didn't used to when I was a child. Those are things that, how do we measure that? But there is there is a significant change, and they have seen that in Waltham Forest.
Very good points, Joanna. I'd now like to move on to consultation. So there's been quite a few questions about this. So there's, I guess the first one is from those that support this scheme, you know, how can they get involved in the next stages of this? In fact, I'll ask you the series of questions after you've answered each bit.
Okay, no problem. So obviously
Chris.
We're planning on launching the consultation in August to allow people to feedback their views. We're looking for people to give us their thoughts on the strategies as a whole. This is the high level strategic piece of the work. We're not asking them to come forward specifically with how it affects their particular road. That would be developed as we go forward. This is about the principles within the strategies. Obviously, we're really keen to hear from people who are in favour of such schemes, but we're also really interested in getting feedback from those who don't tend to respond to these types of consultations. So those without cars, we're really interested to hear their views, trying to really pick up those areas where you know, car impact, vehicle impact has been significant over many years, and trying to really understand their issues with it and how these policies could help change their communities.
And then another question about, you know, those who might not be able to respond or might not, you know, might find it more challenging, because obviously not everybody is online. So how will we plan to consult with those who aren't online?
Yeah, absolutely. We obviously encourage online responses because they're easier to analyse. We don't have to type in their responses, etc. So we can measure it. But of course, as with all council consultations, there will be the opportunity for people to write to us, and we will have postal addresses and similar on all of our consultation documentation.
And what about other issues that might come up through the consultation? You know, I know that, you know, over the years, many people have been quite interested in perhaps bypass schemes and that type of scheme. You know, will people be, you know, would you encourage people to put in alternatives?
Obviously, we're interested in people's views on how they see the city moving in the long term. This is a long-term strategy about how we can get communities moving in a different way and people moving in a different way. This isn't specifically about bypasses, about how people could push forward those types of schemes. But obviously, we're able to take responses on anything, and we'll analyse them and feedback within it. But I think it's really about people trying to understand what we're doing within the strategies and give us their thoughts and feedback on those strategies, on the key principles, on the elements that will help their area and other areas develop over time whilst we face the challenge of the climate emergency and the obesity crisis, etc.
Yeah, and just to go back to that statistic, 42% of all car journeys are for journeys of less than 3 kilometres in our city. You know, the consequences are non-party political. So what other options do people have? If there's something significantly different out there that you think would enable that change, then we'd love to hear from you. But, you know, we've looked at the length and breadth of this country to find out what else other people are doing and how they're thinking. And we can't see any other scheme that could deliver on this in any other way. So it's not that we don't, if you have a brilliant scheme, we'd love to hear from you. But the way to get that change within our own local community, with the situation that we have at hand, which is both social justice, environment and health, how do we deliver for people so that we can encourage them to use their bodies and remain healthy and well?
And just a question which is around schemes that might suddenly need to be delivered. I don't know if government's thinking about any emergency livable neighbourhood schemes, but you know, such a scheme might be put to us that we have to implement. You know, there could be other schemes coming forward. You know, I'm fairly sure we hadn't considered social distancing measures before this pandemic. how will that fit in, and other schemes that you might not know about, how will they fit into what we're proposing to
so what I would say is that Boris Johnson was the instigator of the changes that took place in Waltham Forest. So when he was Mayor of London, he went out to the various parts of London and said to them, look, I want significant change in your areas to improve health and get people to actively move around. You go and do that, and if you do, I'll give you a big amount of money. And that's how this came about. So the Conservative government, even though I'm not sitting in their party, are clearly see that this has had a significant success rate and that it does work, and they want it to work. They are putting focus and emphasis towards that. I would support that because I think that whatever political party, as I've said already, the consequences are non-party political. We have to work together as a community to change the way our air is so that it's breathable by all, how our health is so that our children can have good lungs to get to be old people. You know, those things are for all of us to deliver. And whichever the party that wants to do that, I would hope that we all come together to enable that change to take place, because it has a benefit for all of our community and it delivers on the carbon neutrality that we're all seeking.
Thank you very much for that, Joanna. I think it is really important to recognise that this isn't just something from one political party. This is an ambition that is shared in different ways across, you know, certainly the three main political parties. So we've spoken a lot about Waltham Forest, which is a Labour-run council. You mentioned Boris Johnson, who, you know, from the Conservative Party, and here we are Liberal Democrats. So it isn't a political issue in that way. Right. I'm just trying to see if there's, I think we've probably got about time for a couple more questions, which I'm going to stick with the theme around consultation and around how pilot areas will be chosen. Can you give some sort of insight about how those areas might be selected? I don't know whether you want to start on that, Joanna, or if Chris wants to start.
I was going to leave Chris to start on that.
Over to you, Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, I think what we'll be looking for is for communities to come together with their local ward members. Within the strategies, we've set out a pro forma for people to be able to respond back, and that will be part of the consultation papers, so that we can really sort of gather understanding from the area what the issues are, where they are. We have a lot of knowledge about the city as a whole, but we really need to understand from the users, from the people on the ground, the residents, how they want to take forward any scheme, and then try to really align that with the strategic understanding of how the city moves and the network management duties we have as a council to bring it forward. So we'll be looking for those who are interested in exploring it further to work with their local ward members and come forward with options for what they would like to see within their areas. We'll then have to prioritise them. As you can imagine, we have a prioritisation matrix within the strategies where we talk about how we would do it, what we will measure on. And then the reality is we don't have resources to do all of them at once. We're not going to be able to deliver everything in one go. So we have to start thinking about how we can best utilise the resources we have, and making sure that we can bring forward as many schemes as we can where the communities are in favour, and deliver them on the ground in a timely manner, in a reasonable time frame as well. Some of these will have challenges without a doubt. Some of them will need to be done under experimental orders and similar, so people have an understanding that they can see how it works on the ground, and it can evolve over time to really get the right scheme in place, because I think that's the outcome we're looking for, isn't it? It's not about imposition of any scheme on any area. It's about finding the right scheme for all of the residents, and that means everybody from the small children on bikes through to those who have to commute every day and are under time pressure when they're dealing with family life and caring responsibilities, through to the very elderly who may not drive anymore and are more isolated. So we've got a lot of different views to manage through that process.
So, so the public consultation, I think, is going to start in August. And then how long is the consultation going to last for?
We're allowing 6 weeks for the public consultation for people to give their views back. We're conscious that August is a difficult time of year at times for people as people go away. And although there's been some changes because of COVID and people's holiday plans being disruptive, we still recognise people may be away. We want people to take the time to read the documents, understand what we're trying to do, and feedback their comments to us.
And we'll obviously attach the website for your comments onto this webinar when it's published, so that you'll be able to access that simply. But obviously we'll make sure that we put out those other places where you will be able to access the consultation if you aren't online. Okay, I think we're probably running out of time now. So what I was going to just ask, if there was any last comments that the panel would like to make, sort of any closing remarks. So Sarah, anything from you?
No, I would just encourage people to engage with the consultation because I think this is an enormous opportunity. I think a number of people have been posting comments about, that Bath is not the same as Waltham Forest and other concerns about it. And absolutely, I agree that, no two towns are the same. There are different issues everywhere, but the air quality issues, the obesity crisis, the climate emergency all dictate that we cannot do nothing. We have to try something. So this is what we are proposing to try, and we'd love you to engage with it to try and make it as good as it can be. And we'll put it in and we'll monitor it closely, with traffic counts, air quality measures, and we want your feedback. And, let's just please engage with us and we'll make it as good as we can do.
Thank you. And Councillor Wright, any closing remarks from you?
Just to say, just to back up what Sarah has said, and also to just say, it's really hard when you sit outside of politics to wonder what they're doing all day. And a year or so ago, I was not in politics and I didn't know how it all worked. It is quite strange how glacial it moves along, which seems to be the wrong metaphor to use, particularly in this time of a climate emergency. But we do have the glaciers melting now, so we do need to speed up and make change. We do need to deliver something. How we deliver that is not fixed, but we think this is one of the best ways to do something that could have change. It's going to not be as straightforward as people imagine. The resources within our own council are limited and small, so we can only do a bit by bit. So people will need to be patient with us too, who have high expectations. And for those who have no expectations, what else do we have to lose at this point? So give it a go and try and feedback positive messages to us to make this change.
Thank you, Joanna. And from Chris.
Thank you. I'll just sort of highlight the fact that we have tried to take the best practice both nationally and internationally to develop these strategies, but we are really keen that people recognise we're trying to overlay them on to Baines, and we're keen to get feedback on how that's actually going and where we can improve them. So it is really about that feedback being critical to making sure we have good quality strategies in place that we can deliver on.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say thank you very much to all my panellists, to Councillor Sarah Warren, to Councillor Joanna Wright, to Chris Major, and also thank you to the officers who've been working behind the scenes to make sure this webinar could actually run as it has done. Obviously we are very grateful to you for the work that you do. I'd finally like to say thank you very much to everyone who's been watching today. My apologies again for the technical issues at the beginning, and also my apologies if we haven't been able to answer your questions. We have tried to do what we could within the time that we are allotted, but we will try and get back to you with an answer as swiftly as possible. So just like to say thank you again to everybody, and good afternoon. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.